Hi! It's been a while since I've done any kind of videos in English. I wanted to make a video response today to Alice Cappelle, who is another French YouTuber who makes videos in English, and I thought that it would be easier for me to record this in English, add French subtitles for anyone that's not English speaking, and that it could potentially reach a demographic that would be interested in having a video response. So recently, very recently, I mean yesterday, I watched a video that was entitled The Instrumentalization of Muslim Women. That's a very interesting subject. However, I was highly disappointed, not necessarily because what's said in the video is entirely false or outrageous, but because I think that it is pretty dishonest, and I felt like it was pretty obscene in some ways to make this video in the time that she did and the way that she did. So let me explain. In case you haven't seen the video, this is a video, as I said, entitled The Instrumentalization of Muslim Women, and on the thumbnail of the video you can see pictures of individuals that clearly indicate that she's going to talk about Iran, with the picture of Mahsa Amini on the left or the right. And this was posted 2 months ago, I believe. So it was in the very midst of the events in Iran, the revolution. You would expect, watching this video, that this would address the different issues that women face in Iran, and maybe the way it is received by the media throughout the world, or maybe the way that powers, whether it be political or religious, are using women in Iran, or maybe in the Middle East, or maybe whatever, whatever. But that was not the case. The video was mainly virtue signaling at its finest, the perfect opportunity apparently to be like, look at me, I am not going to say the same things as everybody else, and I'm going to take a different approach to this issue, not realizing that using the very pictures of those people on your thumbnail, posting it in the midst of the event, and yet not talking at all about what's happening in Iran, not relaying any voices of Iranian women or Iranian men, instead focusing on France solely and, discussing what you think France has been doing for years, or what you think France Islamophobia is, whatever. That's not right. It didn't sit well with me. I felt pretty actually nauseous watching the video. I felt like this was such a disrespectful way of handling the situation, the topic, and of treating and using basically the Iranian situation. So I wanted to reply to this video. Throughout the video, Alice talks about Muslim women in Iran, Muslim women in Algeria, Muslim women everywhere in the world. In Iran, you cannot really be anything else but Muslim. There are 4 faiths that are recognized and accepted by the state. However, it is very difficult to claim that you are anything but Muslim. And it is impossible, or at least it is illegal, it's forbidden to say that you don't believe in God, that you have no religion. This is forbidden, and this is punishable by death, like it is in many other Muslim countries. Second thing that I find very annoying, that's an oversimplification, and that's also incorrect, is that whenever she talks about Muslim women, or women generally in Algeria, she will say Arab women, Arab women, Arab women, Arab women. Actually, especially if you go back in time, people in Algeria, people in Morocco, people in Tunisia, they're not Arabs. They are Berber people, and they were colonized by the Arabs, and that's why now there is Arabic as a language. That's why they have such a strong shared culture with Arabic countries, and that's why they're Muslims. Sometimes I wonder how people think that Islam arrived in Ivory Coast or Senegal, or how it arrived in Malaysia, for example, or in Pakistan. It actually arrived in those countries because of colonization. And I think it's very, very dishonest, and it's very telling as well that whenever we discuss colonization, which is what Alice is doing in the video, we only talk about the colonization that was, perpetrated by the French, by the Europeans. Colonization is a crime. It's a heinous, absolutely disgusting crime that we need to talk about, that we need to apologize for, that we need to pay and compensate people, foreign countries for. No doubt about that. But why is it and how is it that whenever we talk about colonization, we only address one type of colonization, which, by the way, really, if you think about it, has not as many long-lasting effects as the Arabic colonization had. And that's a big taboo, apparently. So the result is that suddenly countries that have nothing to do with each other, like Iran and Algeria, because of culture, because of religion actually, because of language, because of ethnicity, are put into a big group that's a very homogeneous group, whether actually it's true or not, we don't care. And that's the Muslim people of the world, and that's the Muslim women of the world. When women in Iran right now are actually fighting to dismantle the tools of oppression that are religious, but not only, and we'll talk about that, to call them Muslim women, not even addressing the fact that they don't really have the choice to be Muslim or not really addressing the fact that, by the way, the last surveys that were conducted in Iran clearly indicate that the majority of the population has very drastically changed their political but also their religious beliefs. Most people do not practice any religion anymore in Iran. This is such an ignorant way of presenting facts, and ignorance is not a crime, but when you make a video, when you publish the video, it clearly means you have done research. So that's not ignorance on your part. What is it? I don't know. I'd rather not say. Another thing that I really want to address is that in the video, Alice is very focused on the fact that apparently any policy or any actions that are led in favor of secularism are the result of colonization or of the white Western viewpoint. This is not true. This is absolutely not true. When you look at Tunisia, for example, they have very similar laws to France that were conducted and passed under Bourguiba. So, in France, you cannot wear the veil if you work for the state, let's say national education system, or in the offices that are, led and run by the state. But that's it. That's really just it. You can wear the hijab in the street, you can wear the hijab anywhere. You can open your own shop with a hijab. That's it. That's really just it. These laws are the same as in Tunisia. In Tunisia, you cannot work for the state and be in la fonction publique and wear the hijab. Those laws are not actually well enforced and respected right now. A very different topic, but I think we're really seeing a strong return of the religion and the religious in societies, but that's something completely different. We're not going to address this in this video. But so what? Are Tunisian men and women who voted for these laws, passed these laws, Westerners in disguise, colonizers in disguise? What about the Algerian women who fought for, removing the veil as well? What about Egyptian women who fought for this as well? What about the different policies conducted in different countries in the world that have really tried to place religion in the private sphere and not the public sphere? Are they all influenced by Westerners? Is this only a Western white idea and value? So to think that secularism is only a concern for white or European people, it is completely untrue. And that's, a simple negation of the fact that in any given country, in any given culture, in any given part of the world, there will be a plurality of opinions, of political stances, and to negate that, to absolutely deny the right for those people in Algeria, in Egypt, in Turkey, in Iran, in anywhere in the world really, to maybe oppose religion, to maybe fight for secularism, to maybe approve what's being done in France or in wherever in the world, well, that's kind of essentializing, and that's a bit of a patronizing way to see the world and to those people too. So maybe women like Nawal al-Saadawi, Huda Sha'rawi, Marjane Satrapi, for example, Sihem Apshi, Masih Alinejad, that I really recommend you follow online, or Assa Jebar, perhaps too, Marmal Sherali. Maybe all these women are what, some people call native informants. Maybe those women's voices and experiences have absolutely no value because they contradict those of some Western feminists who have completely lost their ability to criticize religion, to criticize Islam, and to bring nuances to the debate. They are always talking about nuances. Yet, they make proof of none of that in the way they speak, in the way they address those very complex issues. So maybe those women we have nothing to learn from because a white French young woman living in the UK has said that, secularism is basically a manifestation and a proof of French racism. I don't think so, as you can probably tell. I actually think that this young woman should perhaps educate herself on le relativisme culturel, cultural relativism, like Mona El-Tahawiya has very clearly explained in one of her books, Why the Middle East Need a Sexual Revolution. And she should perhaps also do more research on history. Just saying. What I find very surprising every time we discuss these things is the fact that some people use comparisons all the time without realizing that this is not always interesting. And this is not always the right thing to do. You cannot simply compare things and think that because you're comparing these things, you're actually making a point. That's actually not what's happening right now. And the second thing is that two things can be both true at once without being exclusive. You can, yes, criticize, and sure, you can, and I actually think you should criticize and, talk about the fact that the right-leaning political parties or the far right are actually using and, yes, instrumentalizing women, especially Muslim women, but not only, whenever they want to, serve their political agenda or to feed their own political beliefs. Yes, you can absolutely criticize that while also acknowledging that religions are very misogynistic entities and that the female body in Islam, in Judaism, in Christianity, but also in Buddhism actually, is something that's not treated very well. It's something that should be hidden because it is an object of temptation. Those two things can be true at once. It doesn't have to be one or the other. That's what's called nuance. And if you're actually interested in, what the media says about what's happening in Iran or in any other given country at the time, because that's a very interesting and valid, I believe, subject of study, maybe you should do it as well in other countries. Maybe you shouldn't solely be focused on the far right in France. Maybe you should also look at what other Muslim countries are saying in regards to what's happening in Iran. What is the Ummah saying about what's happening? What's the discourse in other Muslim countries? Because that's interesting too, actually. But maybe you don't do it because that's not that easy. Maybe it's easier, surely is, to always talk about the far right. Maybe it's easier, maybe it's more consensual, maybe it is more politically correct. So, because apparently this was too difficult for Alice to do in her video, let's just briefly mention a few things that women have not the right to do in Iran. So women cannot dance in public in Iran. Women cannot attend sports events when they're men's sports events. Women cannot travel outside of the country without the approval of their male guardian. Women cannot get a divorce unless they have a valid reason that's approved by the judge. Women cannot go outside without wearing the hijab and without having, the rest of their outfit being judged and thought as modest enough. Let's talk also about the fact that marriages are oftentimes forced marriages, that it is actually very common to have little girls and children and teenagers marry older men, of course. That, of course, a man can marry up to four women. Let's talk about the fact that a man can marry his adopted daughter. Just a few things, right? So, of course, those are a few elements that I wanted to bring in, but let's just think more broadly. if you think of such a society, obviously women cannot really be free to create, to have the job that they want, to study as much as they want, to do what they want with their life. They are completely subjected to men's approval, men's rules, men's opinions, men's desire in any aspect of their lives. So let's just compare that to what's happening in France, right? Because that's what Alice does in her videos. She compares the Ayatollah in Iran with the French president. And God knows I don't like Macron, but really? She compares blatantly the situation of Muslim women in France and the situation of women in Iran. So Muslim women in France cannot wear the hijab if they work for the state. Muslim women in France cannot wear a full veil, like the burqa or the niqab, in public. Muslim women, or rather I should say Muslim little girls and Muslim teenagers cannot wear hijab to go to primary school, middle school and high school. That's it. That's the French Islamophobia right there. Clearly, I don't see any difference with what's happening in Iran, right? So, and just a quick add-in. In the video, there is a segment that I think is supposed to be funny about the fact that secularism in France is not really secularism because one religion is more accepted than the others and is favored over the others, meaning that Christianity is favored in France. And the example that she gives is just that there is a church in a French village. So, you know, secularism doesn't mean that we should erase the past. Yes, France has a Christian heritage. She also talks, by the way, at length, not really at length, but many times about Judeo-Christian values. Actually, such a thing as Judeo-Christian values does not really exist. That's a term that we use very often, but when you think about it, it's very incorrect. But anyway, so yeah, secularism doesn't mean that, you know, we should erase the past of France. Yes, there are churches and, you know, basilicas in France. Yes, we have, of course, national holidays that are based off Christianity. Doesn't mean that in the political sphere, Christianism is strong. It doesn't mean that Christians are Catholics, because in France, the majority of Christians are Catholics. Does it mean that Catholics in France are not to conform and obey the law when it comes to secularism? Does it mean that because we celebrate Christmas and because we have Notre Dame de Paris in Paris, secularism is actually just racism? I don't think I need to answer that. Anyway, so back to Iran. All the things that I mentioned previously about what women cannot do in Iran, add to that the poverty. Actually, it would be true to say that about 80% of the population of Iran lives under the poverty line. That the corruption is so strong, it's actually just unbearable, that you have an authoritarian state that has been, you know, in place for decades. Inflation is super high. The prices of, you know, first necessity products are incredible. And there's also a very unknown, apparently, ecological disaster, environmental disaster happening in Iran. And all of that, that's why people are protesting. That's why people are back in the street. That's why people cannot take it anymore. So to, you know, reduce and diminish and summarize this whole fight, which is political, economical, social, religious too, to whether or not women can wear the hijab, to think they're fighting for the right to choose to wear the hijab or not, that's, once again, could be ignorance. And as I said, it's not a crime, but you publish the video, you research it, right? So that's not ignorance on your part. So what is it? To me, it sounds like you're obsessed with the hijab, or you're obsessed with showing how you are not like other feminists. You are not like the, you know, that devil, the white feminist. But you're actually losing about 80% of what women in Iran are fighting for, and you're actually using their picture and their name and the timing to create more maybe views, and you have, you know, also a sponsor in that video. All of that to me is pretty disgusting and distasteful, but you know, whatever. But this is why people in Iran are in the street. Their country is, you know, going through a very, very awful, a terrible situation in all domains of public life and private life as well. Just the courage that they have to go in the street to protest, to lose their lives, it is so strong and so almost, I want to say, unthinkable for us, because we live in such comfort, at least in, you know, France and in the UK. And I feel like this is not even something you can completely understand and completely comprehend. So if I were to conclude, because this video is getting quite long, when the Iranian women are burning their hijabs, this is not a show. They did not receive any rules or any indications or any notice of, you know, you should do this, you should do it that way, you should dance around burning your hijabs by the Western media, by the Western governments, by the Western feminists, by the Western whatever. They don't need any of that actually to think of removing their veil in public and burning their hijabs. This is not the first time it's happened, and no, this did not happen only in Algeria, orchestrated by the French colonizers. They do it because that's what they want to do, really. And instead of seizing the opportunity to, because you have such a big audience, to maybe recommend some books to read about what's happening in Iran or the history of Iran, maybe just giving voices to some of your subscribers. I'm sure some of them have Iranian roots, or maybe even are Iranians. Instead of giving their platform to voice their experiences, their concerns, their feelings, to give some insight of what's happening, you are just using this as a mean to virtue signaling once again, and to, I don't know, just show you that you are a good, woke, leftist person and feminist. That's nonsense, really. That's nonsense. It really, to me, honestly, I didn't mean to be like sarcastic in this video, and I know I was a little bit, but that's because it's so infuriating to me. The reason why I haven't talked about this issue is because I don't even know what I could bring to the discussion or to the table. Like, you know, I'm currently reading a book that's called, I don't know if it's been translated into English or not. It's called La malédiction du religieux, la défaite de la pensée démocratique en Iran. The religious curse, the fail of democratic thought or the democracy in Iran. And I am reading this book, and I wanted to at least read this book and a few other, and listen to a few podcasts to maybe do something. And the indecency of publishing such a video in the way that it's been done by Alice, to me, is truly appalling. And of course, if you look at the comments, there are a lot of hijabis who are complimenting the video. Of course. But there are also a lot of Iranian women saying, we're not all Muslims. The way you're portraying this whole event and this whole situation is actually incorrect. Why are you using our names and our pictures to talk about something that's completely different? And when I replied and actually commented on the video, she told me that I should open up and that I should listen to other people and that I should decenter and stop speaking and thinking based on my own experience. But like, you're entitling the video the instrumentalization of Muslim women. You're using pictures that are strongly related to the Iranian situation, and you're only talking about France and your point of view of what French secularism is. Isn't that being very self-centered? I would think so. So I find this very honestly concerning, that this is only what the left has produced when it comes to discussing what's happening in Iran. Of course, this is not true. That's not all the left. But people are so afraid, basically, of having these discussions, and they have completely forgotten that you can be nuanced and you can criticize a few things at the same time. You can also give your opinion and admit that perhaps you're wrong, perhaps your opinion will change. But really what I wanted to say in this video is that not every feminist in the West thinks like that. Not every feminist in the West thinks that the situation of Muslim women in France or in Spain or in Germany or wherever is what's happening to Muslim women in Iran or the Iranian women as a whole. Not everyone is afraid to admit that there's something quite authoritarian when it comes to religion in a few countries. Not everyone is afraid to say that religions are misogynistic. You know, simple but true. Honestly, I've thought of all those women that were perhaps waiting for a video of support, a video of information, and that would just finally click on the video and just see a young, white, privileged woman talk about the freedom to wear not the hijab, when in reality, if I were Iranian, I would be like, what about the poverty in my country? What about the right to choose your own religion? What about the right to marry or get a divorce? What about the right to travel? What about the right to go out freely without covering my hair, without covering my whole body, without covering myself, basically? What about the right to protest? You know, it's not only that, it's just the fact that any person, especially women, who talk publicly about the treatment of women in Iran, they are, you know, sentenced to death, or they are sentenced to prison, or they are sentenced to corporal punishment, like a very famous Iranian lawyer was called Nasrin Sotoudeh, and she defended women who went out without wearing their hijab, and she's been in prison ever since. This is what we need to talk about when we talk about Iran. And yes, of course, criticize colonization, criticize French colonialism and imperialism in other countries. Criticize all of that, but don't use Iran as a tool or as a way to attract more people, or to pretend that you're making a point that's oh so different and transgressive when you're actually just being very disrespectful. Yeah. So thank you for watching this video, and there aren't really anything or any words that could convey how much I am praying and hoping and wishing for the liberation of Iranians. So I can't really say anything, but I hope all of that ends well soon.